Hello to all. Just a quickish idea on a parsha. We have Torah says that Torah says in our parsha that one who Torah says like this. It says that person has to give the matnos kihuna, and says that. Okay, so here we go. It says v'yishka hashav lo yu asher yitin lekohen lo yiyeh. So you have to give, and then it says there's saying more. And daven is on time. Ish gesiste ishta. So essentially, what the Torah does, it's masmich. It puts near each other two ideas. The first one is that a Jew must give matanos kahuna, the gifts of the kahuna, which is the zraya, the chayayim, etc., and the truma. And then right after that, it says this inyan of sota. So Chazal and Brachos and Rashi quotes it. They're bothered by what's the smichas. Why are these two things right next to each other? We know that the Torah is not put in random order. So when things are next to each other, it means there's some connection between the two concepts and two ideas that are being discussed. So why is the concept of giving the gifts to the kohen? Why is that near and right before this parsha of a man having to bring his kohen bring his wife to the kohen and her possibly cheating on him, etc. What's the smichus? So Rashi says over here, makasav l'mala min ha'inyan. What does it say? L'mala min ha'inyan, right above what we're talking about, the saita. It says v'ish as kadashav lo yuhiu. So Chasal Darshan and Brachos is quoting that v'ish is kadashav. It says ish and his holy, the parts of the animal will be for him, meaning that he holds them back from the kohen. That the darshan get to mean that he's not giving the matnas kahuna, and it says like this: if you hold back the gifts that are supposed to go to the kohen, chayecha, it's a lashon of shvur, like by your life, that you will need to go to him, to bring the sota to him. And then we have here ishish lamedcha shemay eles b'shtayim, to teach you that the woman, she is being moyel. We'll use the word violating in two. Ish melchama shelamala, v'isha milamat. The ish melchama, which refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says by Kriyas Yamsuf, Hashem ish melchama, Hashem shemo. So she's being moyel in that ish, meaning God, and then also her husband milamata, from under. So perhaps after our explanation, we can get some sort of clarity. And then about that as well, but not guaranteed. So the reason why it's called sota siste is because it is shtus of shaita, and the Chazal say that a woman that never, cheaters that don't cheat until a ruach of shtus goes into them. So perhaps we will be able to define what that means. What is a ruach shtus, and how Chazal defining shtus in this context, and how is it relevant to the general idea. So, in order to answer these questions and to give an understanding of what these Rashis are saying, I would like to opine a fascinating idea. And that idea is as follows. The idea is like this. People, they don't really, unfortunately, know a lot of the mechanism of how they work. And I'd like to suggest the following thing. We know that everyone has an identity structure. Everyone has identities. Now, for the sake of our learning being something that people can actually gain from and use as an insight into their life, we will try to clarify all the terms that we use, that they can be palatable and experiential for everyone who's listening. So when I say an identity structure, what I mean is that a person has a manner in which he views himself via the world. So how he relates to the world around him as an identity structure. So let's prove this from a simple, out there, a regular example, if you ask someone what they are, the average person will tell you, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, I am a rabbi. And what are they really saying when they're answering that question? What they're saying is, this is my role within society. In other words, this is the way that I contribute, that I give to the world around me. This is my contribution. This is how I am working in tandem with society around me. And that is what they say their identity is. And this is also true in terms of the idea of more spiritual things as well. Someone says, if someone asks a Jew, who are you? He will say, I'm a Jew. And what does that mean that he's a Jew? That means that he belongs to a nation of people who are Jews, and that comes with the reality of giving. It comes with tzedakah, it comes with being part of it, it comes with helping out, it comes with saying tehillim when things go wrong, it comes with you're part of a structure. The identity structure of people is the roles that they take on within relationship dynamics in which they are the giver and the participator. Now, what the Torah is telling us over here, I believe, is the following, is that within any given identity structure, there are many layers. What does many layers mean? It means that if I say, I have a role as a giver, there could be many relationships which describe the different roles. So a person could be a father, a husband, a son, a friend. All of these roles are relationship roles within which the person is giving. And if they're part of his identity structure, then essentially what's going on is that these are the ways in which he views himself as operating as a giver and as one who works in conjunction with those around him in society. Right? So that's what that means on the simple level. What the Torah is telling us here is a very fascinating insight, and that is that there isn't such a thing as having an identity structure lemechza. There's no such thing as saying that I'm fulfilling a role in one aspect but not in the other. The Torah has a terminology for someone who is fulfilling all of his roles correctly, and that is someone who is shalem, someone who is whole. The Torah says this about Yaakov Avinu, that he is shalem, he was whole. And the idea is that a person within society, either he isolates himself and views himself as being what's important, his immediate sense of self, or he views himself and his main sense of expression within the different roles that he has as a giver and as someone who works in conjunction with those around him. So for most people, there's somewhat of a balance, but the idea over here is that definitely if you do something in terms of one of the ways in which your identity is structured in a specific manner of relationship, and you do something negative to break down that manner of relationship, it will automatically affect and impact and break down all the rest of your relationships. A person cannot be a shalem lemechza. It can't be someone who operates within his identity as a giver and as someone who works with and in conjunction with all those around him. That can't happen lemechza. So what that means is like this. What are we saying over here? We're saying that there is a Yid, you have a Jew. We know that the Jewish nation is split up into three categories. Right? There is a Yisrael, there is a Levi, and there's a Kohen. And if we learn the Chumash, we know that Leviim and Kohanim are essentially more, one can say, a more purified version. One could say that there are representatives, different ways of putting it, but certainly they're Yisraelim plus. and they're a unique part of the fashion in which the Jewish nation operates. Now, a person, a Jew, one of the structures of identity within which he operates, so you have father, husband, son, yeah, and then there is Jew, Yisrael. A identity of Yisrael, in order for it to function properly and relate to the other category, in order for it to function properly, it has to correctly relate to the other categories which Yisrael includes, because that defines its role. In other words, let me just make this very, very simple. An identity structure doesn't work and is not valid unless it plays its specific role within the relationship that it has taken on. So if someone is a husband and he neglects his wife and doesn't take care of her or talk to her, whatever, etc., and he cannot therefore from that point on be justifiably called a husband, because in order to say that you are operating within your role within an identity structure, you have to be operating and be fulfilling your role within that relationship. So now, if we go to a Kohen Levi Yisrael, the Torah commands the Jewish person as a facet and as a way of relating to the other parts of the Jewish nation, of Levi and Yisrael, that the way that he does that, the way that he relates to them, is that he gives them the matnes kehuna. That's his recognition of their role in the Jewish nation, and that the fact that they're shluchim and that they don't have their own, they're not Isaac Parnasa because they are doing avodas Hashem. They're in the Beis Mikdash, they're doing the korbanos, etc. So he gives a chelik of his animal, the shok and the chazeh, the thigh and the breast of the animal to the kohen. Now, what are we saying? We're saying that if a yid keeps his chazeh and shoik and the matas guna, he keeps them to himself and he does not give them to the kohen. He doesn't give them to him. Now, what happens? So, essentially, what we're saying over here is that what's happening is that this person is beginning to make a decision which breaks down his structure as an individual who is shalem, who is whole, meaning as someone who views himself in terms of his identity, which means in terms of the way that he operates within relationships that he is engaged in as a giver. Just want to make the expressions and the words that I'm using very, very clear. So when someone now refrains from giving the matas gehuna, essentially what he's doing is he is refraining from operating within his identity structure as a Yisrael. Because again, in order to operate within your identity structure, you have to play the role within the whole, and you have to do the role. You have to fulfill the role that you have within the whole of the relationship. So within the whole of Yisrael, within the whole of being part of the nation of Yisrael, the correct way to relate within the structure of being a Jew and within Am Yisrael is to give the matnas kahuna to the Kohanim, because that's your recognition of their role within the Jewish nation. And if you're not doing that, that means that you are essentially beginning to break down your own sense of self that comes from, and that is the fact that you view yourself in the main as someone who is a giver and someone who fulfills his roles within his relationships. I just want to make that point clear. In other words, there are two general ways in which people feel expressed. They feel that when I say expressed, I mean that they enjoy it, that it is who they are. The first one is when they receive, when they experience or indulge in pleasure. And the second one is when they give and when they operate within their relationships. That has a feeling that is good, and a lot of good people, they express themselves. They feel expressed within operating as part of a relationship. So as a husband, it would feel good to give to your wife, which I think for most people it does. I wouldn't personally know, but I think that for sure in other ways I would know, giving back to the community, helping out another Jew, it feels tremendously, tremendously good. And if the person has the option to, and this is what the Torah is ruts on, this is what obviously is supposed to be, the person when he does those things and fulfills those roles, he comes to feel pleasure and feel that he is being expressed when he performs the action of his role. And that is the way that the Torah, the Torah prescribes, and Torah has people, wants them to achieve self-expression. So a person, is not supposed to be, it's not supposed to be that the place that he feels expressed and the place that he feels that he's himself is when he's, watching the TV or eating the good food or driving the nice car. People who feel expressed through those things are on an extremely low level. Everybody knows that the pleasure of a good marriage and of children and of being, part of a community far, far, far supersedes any of the menial, any of the small physical things like a nice this, a nice that, good food. Everybody knows that those things are a different, totally lower tier of pleasure. And actually, Noach Weinberg has a breakdown of the 5 tiers of pleasure, and physical pleasure is mamash in the lowest tier. So the point is that in terms of a person, in terms of their decision to operate with an identity structure, in terms of giving or not, it's all or nothing. It is impossible to decide to break and not operate within your identity structure and within your role as being a yid and still operate as a good husband and as a giver within your role as a husband to a wife. And essentially, therefore, because that's the case, because identity structure and whether a person is viewing himself as a giver and as someone who takes pleasure and self-expression and joy within his fulfillment of his roles in the relationships that he has, because that's all or nothing, if someone is now going to disregard the kohen by not giving his matnas kahuna, it is going to follow that he will then have a breakdown of a relationship with his spouse, as I'm explaining. And the reason, I'm going to reiterate, the reason is because the role of a husband, obviously, is the role of a giver, is the role of someone who must give to somebody else. And it not only is it the role of a giver, it is a lifestyle choice which necessitates that is now the way the person will live. He will live as a giver. That's what it necessitates. It necessitates, at least in good marriages, necessitates sensitivity to another person's feelings on a regular basis, all the time, and doing things for them and making sure they feel good and taken care of and loved and comfortable. All these things are hanachas. They're assumptions that go into being a husband, which shows and which tells you that a husband is probably one of the most profound choices that a person can make in terms of the idea of him being a giver as opposed to a taker, in terms of him operating and feeling expressed and joyful within his role as someone who is giving to others as opposed to someone who's taking, even if it's not taking from others, taking, period. And therefore, if a person is going to break down his identity structure where it's relevant in terms of giving to a kohen, meaning that he's breaking down his structure as a Yisrael, it will immediately lead to the breakdown of structure in his marriage. And that is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu did something brilliant, which is that he made it that a wife is, it says in the pasuk, is Ezer Kenegdo. Let's see, I have a Gemara in Yevamos over here. It says that, what does it mean I will make an Ezer Kenegdo? It means Zacha, if a person is Zoche, and in our definition, that means that he is whole and complete, and he views himself as someone who is a giver, and he operates and enjoys and feels self-expressed within his role as a giver, whether it's a husband, father, son, Jew, fellow human being, whatever it is, he views self-expression in those things. If he takes pleasure in them, then his wife is Oizarta, she helps him. Loizacha, if he does not view it that way, Kenegdoi. And the brilliance of this dynamic, of this relationship, is that the idea is the same. It's all or nothing. It's not a wonder that in general, when people in the world, when people's lives break down, if they're because they get addicted to something, or if they lose their job and they're too lazy to get another one, etc., etc., when their senses of self and their senses of structure break down, they almost always get divorces. That's almost always how it works. And that's not a wonder, and that is because of the fact that the reality of having a wife is either she's helping you or she's against you. And you'll notice that this is the brilliance of the perush of the explanation, which you've said many times at this point, of shalom, and therefore shalom as well, is that having shalom bias and being at peace doesn't mean peace. It doesn't mean that it's a lack of fighting. It means that you're working in conjunction with and operating at the same time and complementarily operating with somebody to accomplish something. And this is the dynamic by the wife. There's no such thing as a wife who is neither an Azer or a Kenegdo. It's always going to be either she's against you or she's helping you. It's one or the other. It's not just I am existing and you're existing and then just nothing. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And you see that in Mitzias, and any person who has a marriage which is just the wife is not either helping him or screaming at him, that is b'chlal, not a marriage. That's just two people who are together and deciding to use each other. That's not even the definition of marriage at all. But with Jews, it's a davar pashut that this is the case, and I think probably most of us probably know this idea that either the wife is an azer or she's a kenegda. There's no in the middle. There's no just monotone. Just I'm just here, and you do you, I do me, and just I don't really care about you or the way that your life is going, or we're just gonna what I'm saying, it just pasha doesn't work that way, and that is because of this reason that the metric of whether a person is operating in terms of a giver, an identity role, a structure, or he's operating as a taker and someone who is only views importance ending with himself, that itself will be determined by the relationship with his wife, because the relationship of marriage is the dynamic in which a person comes out of himself and has to now be sensitive to another person on a regular basis. Again, a healthy marriage. And that is what allows for a person to take on the structure of identity and being a giver. And that is why Chazal say that the units within Klal Yisrael is you have an individual and you have a mishpacha, and the mishpacha is a unit, a part of a unit of Klal Yisrael. In other words, there is no such thing as a individual unmarried person being part of Klal Yisrael. It's a mishpacha, it's a person, and he gets married as a family, and the family is the individual units that make up a nation, not an individual person. And this is true factually, and it's been true for all of history, that when any societies that family structures broke down within, the whole society collapsed. This is true of Rome, it's true of many, many, many societies. And the reason for that is very, very simple. It's very, very simple, and that is that a family structure is a structure which the brilliance of it is that it gets a person to the point in which he understands that he must operate in a consistent and real fashion that is productive to provide for those people, because that person doesn't care about himself. He cares about other people. And therefore, he is motivated to work a job, hold up an economy, etc., 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 or fight for his people, whatever those things that go into it. But it is very important to note that it's actually the concern for others that makes it that a person has the consistency to work and uphold a society. And that is a very, very important point over here. And therefore, that is how we're answering the Chazal, and this brilliant concept and insight into how it is that the structure of human identity operates. And now we'll go on, we'll attempt to use this concept to perhaps perhaps to answer this next Rashi, and he said that the pasuk says ish kisis deishto, and it says that she's me'eles b'shtayim. What does it mean she's me'eles? We know that the definition of me'ila conventionally is the idea that person has something that's kodesh, it's holy, it was consecrated, it was given to the Beis Hamikdash as a status of kedusha, and then a person goes ahead and he uses it for chol, for mundane reasons. So what happened was that me'ila, the really definition of me'ila is the perversion and misuse of something. In other words, it was meant to have a certain role, it was meant to be, given towards and consecrated towards something, and now that usage has been perverted, it's been violated. And it's very exact. The Torah uses the lashon of that she is moyel. The woman is moyel. Why is the Torah using the lashon of me'ila by the woman who is a saita? What's this idea of me'ila? Why doesn't it say she's doing an favor? What's the me'ila? Me'ila is because what is happening is that a structure has been created, a structure of kedusha, which is the kedusha of the holiness of a wife to her husband, and she's miskadeshes. It's all called kedushin. And when a woman cheats on her husband, she is misusing the formation of the structure which HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up, which has kedusha in it, which means that she is perverting a dynamic which is meant to play a very specific role. And that is, therefore, a me'ila. It's a perversion, a misuse of something which is meant to be kodesh. And as we spoke about a few weeks ago, kodesh means that something is separated for the sake of something specific. In other words, it has a role. In other words, it operates within an identity structure, which is everything that we're talking about till now. And that, I believe, is why it's called me'ila. Not she's doing an avera. No, she's being moyel. And now we can also understand why he's saying that she's being moyel and HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well, because we know that the only being that gives any sense of objectivity to identity structures is obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only being that really exists. And all sense of existence and reality and stability and consecration and kedusha and structure can only come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, she's being moyel in HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. And now, we'll go on to try to use this concept as well to answer the third Rashi. The third Rashi says that this lashon of sista is the lashon of shtus. And conventionally, when Chazal use the lashon of shoita, obviously, it refers to someone who is brain dead, one can say. Someone who's retarded, someone who's cher shaita v'katan, someone who's mamish. They have no how do you say no brains? They have nothing. There's nothing going on. And I think that probably in our scenario, in our Rashi, the definition of shtus is the pshat that, simply speaking, a person's identity and the manner in which he operates are should always be, and are always in unison. In other words, if this is how I view myself, and to myself, this is how I am, right? So let's take the example in the Torah. If a woman makes a decision to get married, and she views herself as the wife of this man, and she views herself as someone who has a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and is committed to doing his ratzon of helping with the man do with puravu and having children and raising them to learn Torah, and this is how she views herself, right? Then it's only possible to deviate from a person's sense of self-identity if they operate within a moment of retardation, which means a retardation in this scenario, and probably the overall definition for it in general, is going to be operating within a sense of complete lack of consistency with what a person actually is. So it's just a complete self-contradiction. In other words, I am this, I view myself as this, and now I'm going to operate as if I'm not. How does that happen? That only happens if I'm no longer in a headspace which I even have the awareness of what I am. So essentially, it's an aberration. It's a complete aberration of behavior, and therefore it's considered to be a shtus, considered to be a shaitan. And that is the definition of shtus. Shtus means operating with a complete lack of awareness of what you are and what you should be. That is the definition of shtus. And that's why it's pater, because you don't have any daya. You have no sense of connection to any idea of what you are, and therefore that is the pshat. That is enam anoyaf and noyafin achitikanis bahen until it goes into them a ruach shtus, a sense of a sense of complete aberration and complete inconsistency and a sense of complete lack of awareness to who they are. So it's behaving in a manner which it's not shayach for you according to the way that you yourself perceive yourself to operate this way. So how are you doing it? Elamai, you're acting in a way in which you have absolutely no awareness of what you're doing. It's an action which completely is disconnected from who you are, and that is the definition of retardation of shtus in Shabbos.